Today's guest is Myra Betron, an international leader of gender equality and social impact. She spent over 20 years working across 20 countries, helping organizations turn data into action through her venture, PowerHerData. A former advisor to the World Bank and the International Center for Research on Women, Myra now guides UN agencies and global NGOs. And also, when she's sitting around doing nothing, teaches at Johns Hopkins. This is a busy woman, shaping gender transformative strategies that move equality from talk to tangible change. Myra, welcome. You are a busy woman.
Yes, I thought I was going to slow down a bit when I moved here to Mexico and take a little bit more time for myself, but there's a lot of work out there to be done still.
There is, I agree. So I found you through following you on Instagram, and I went, I want to talk to this woman because I love that everything you're doing is data centric and you put it out in such a cool way. Yeah, I love it. So let's dive straight in. What, Tell me why that work of gender equality is so important to you and a bit about your journey that's brought you to, well, living in Mexico right now and working on this subject. Tell me.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me first, Jennifer, and for finding me in behind my faceless, nameless page. I know that was a bit of work. I always say that this work is something that I didn't really choose. It chose me, and it also raised me. I grew up in a household that was shaped by very traditional gender norms. My family immigrated to the United States when I was just 2 years old in the early 80s, and I was raised by a mother that was very much still beholden to those traditional gender norms in many ways. My household was also marked by domestic violence, and my mom, as brilliant, educated, and really, full of lots of potential, she still lived by what she was taught, that she had to hold the family together at all costs, even if that was facing a lot of abuse, that she shouldn't be taking on more than she could in terms of, or at least what she thought she could
Mm.
professionally. And so that held her back from rising up into leadership roles, as much as the leadership of her companies actually found her to be quite talented and wanted to promote her. She'd always say to me, we need to have a man around the house to do X, Y, and Z. And we can't travel alone. So all of these things I saw, and I didn't want to live that life. So that for me, made this work very personal. And I think, for all of us doing this work and for all of us every day, it is quite a personal issue. So I didn't want to shrink myself with those same types of beliefs. And when I started doing this work about 20 years ago, I had the choice. I was studying international development at the time, and in economics as well. I was doing an internship at the World Bank and was given two options: to work on economic empowerment for women in Peru, or work in Central America to research programs that were working with men as well as women to improve sexual and reproductive health and prevent violence in relationships. Somehow that spoke to me, which probably wasn't a coincidence at all. So I chose that path, and that is something that I've been focusing on for the past 20 years at various organizations, as you said.
So the data part, power her data. Like, where did the data part come from, that work you're doing with things like the UN, the World Bank, or where did that part interest you come from? The economics
Yeah.
degrees?
No, so actually, I'll back up a little bit because Power Data is a venture that I started just this year. It's not something that was with me for this 20-year career, but I see data not just in terms of numbers. I actually don't see myself as a numbers person. As much as I think they're very important, and I use numerical data, quantitative data in a lot of the work that I do. I usually do mixed methods, but I really appreciate the stories behind the data. And that's what I think was missing in the work that I was doing, and the field more broadly, and why I started Power Data this year. So as I said, I moved to Mexico actually at the end of last year. thinking that I was going to take some more time off. I had this very busy career that was taking me around the world to different countries. I worked for an organization that was affiliated with Johns Hopkins, which is the leading research university, and had a footprint in about 40 different countries. So I was on a plane a lot. It was a lot of stress in my body, and I just wanted some more time for myself and some more work-life balance. So my plan was to really take some more time, do some more yoga, maybe some scuba diving, take up surfing again. I dabbled a little bit in my 30s. I
You're a
love that you
surfer.
started. Yeah, I love that you started at 56. Uh,
Yeah.
Very inspirational. But this year, when the US government decided they were going to shut down USAID, the Agency for International Development, that really changed what I thought I was going to be doing, which was freelance consulting for a lot of the programs that they fund to promote global health. And within that, promoting social change and development, including gender equality programming. But gender was all of a sudden a bad word and framed as ideological, right? And so I realized that we just weren't telling the story properly, that in fact, this work does have a lot of positive impact. And it's not just a waste of money or something that is, I think for a lot of people, there are certainly challenges to their religious beliefs around addressing and understanding the broad range of gender identities out there and a gender continuum, but there's evidence behind all of that, right? And that's the type of information and science that I wanted to bring to the world, and also bring to bear some of the data that we have on how impactful programming can be, that there are effective ways to promote gender equality and prevent gender-based violence and violence against women. So that's the vision that I have with PowerHerData. And the idea is to really take a lot of the research that I and many other amazing people have been doing and sitting behind paywalls in journals and sitting on shelves, and get it out there in bite-sized, tangible ways that people can understand, that are engaging with infographics, with stories that really sort of speak to the hearts and minds of people out there.
Yeah, so if you're listening to this podcast, I really encourage you to follow Myra's page, POW, so Power Data. You caught my attention so quick. And like, I love data. However, like you said, stories. And it's interesting, in my TED talk I talked about how stories are how our wisdom travels. And so you're sharing data in a way wrapped around kind of like story that makes it easy for us, for me to see and get. And I'm wondering whether that helps shift those social norms and motivate people like me easier than, like you say, if someone's just reading a scientific paper, like that.
Mhm.
This doesn't have the same impact, does it? Or it does, maybe to a limited number of people.
Yes, and I will say there are definitely people that want to see that peer-reviewed journal and dive deep in. And certainly I'm the person that is going to do that to make sure that what is being given is at face value is, I don't want to say correct, but was robust in terms of how they researched it, et cetera. And certainly that's what influences a lot of policy, but we also know there's a lot of other things that influence policy out there. And so we are all really vying for that space now. And I think that's the battle that we have at our hands, the information battle.
Yeah. And the information space has gotten so much noisier recently that to be able to cut through that, you've got to be able to present information in a way that people can receive it and receive the message quickly, because people's attention span, because they're so overloaded, is limited. And I think you're doing that really well, really well.
Thank you.
So thank you for doing what you're doing. I'm curious because you've been on that back end. You've been all around the world, like you say, and you know the kind of money that gets poured into empowering women programs, so to speak. Why do you think they haven't translated into the real equality we'd be wanting them to, maybe as fast as what they could have? What do you think's missing?
Yeah. And I don't want to undermine the amazing work that's been
No.
done in many settings to quote unquote empower women. And, I think those programs have been effective and served a lot of purposes in terms of getting women educated to a level of, being able to participate in the economy, to contribute to their households, to ensure that their children aren't dying from malnutrition, that they don't die from postpartum hemorrhage, so that they have the levels of education needed to understand these things, right? And to take care of basic needs in their family. But I think that does hit a limit. And I saw it across different settings that I worked in, from Guatemala to Tanzania to Nepal, where the frontline workers, be it midwives, community educators, teachers, all of that stress and work was being put on them to support their families, to improve the community, but not given sort of the systems and support to really help them do that in a way that, kind of addresses some underlying structural issues, such as power imbalances in their household that might prevent them from even fully participating. I mean, I worked with a volunteer in Guatemala who often didn't come to work with me on many days because she was being abused at home by her partner or her husband. That's just one example, right? But I can give you many other examples. And beyond that, I think we focused a lot on women. For the past decade or so, there has been more movement around trying to engage men in the gender equality agenda, but that, I think has gotten sort of drips of the funding, and there's definitely even controversy around that, the push-pull on where the funding should go to the men versus the women, when it's really sort of a holistic, we should be looking at it as a holistic agenda. And I think also just focusing on fixing women doesn't really, do the justice of really fixing the broader system. So, women, we can see this now in the West. We have women who are highly educated. They're the ones churning out the medical degrees and the law degrees, but they are still doing, 3 times the amount of care work and working the second shift when they get home. So that burden is very much put on them. That limits their advancement then in the workplace, knocks off a rung in the ladder. But on top of that, you have still a boys' club and social norms that very much impact the perceptions of how well a woman can lead. So I'm talking about things like sexual harassment, or making the workplace really just not a supportive or enjoyable environment for a woman. Something as simple as women being interrupted 3 times as much as men, and not giving the space to speak in meetings. And therefore, those small microaggressions and biases certainly impact not only how well a woman is able to lead, but how well she's perceived as being able to lead. And then beyond that, even though we know from the data, again, going back to the numbers, that organizations or firms that are led by women are actually more profitable, you see that there's very little, about 1% of venture capital investment going into women-led companies. So we know that there's certainly some sort of bias playing a role, or the boys network playing a role there. And those are, again, other sort of rungs that are knocked off for women to climb up that ladder.
It's huge. And it's not a quick, easy fix. I wonder sometimes whether it's going to be generational for like that old boys club to leave, even though they're influencing the young ones coming through. What do you think?
I think I think a lot of us are hoping that's the case, but I want to say that there's change that's possible too, and we have seen it possible. It feels a little bit right now that things are going backwards, right? And that's what we're seeing in the news.
That's why I started this podcast. I mean,
yeah.
It can't go backwards. I can't deal with that.
There's definitely a pushback, but at the same time, we've seen positive change. And one data that I just posted on PowerHerData today was that 1/3 of boys in the UK see that, or think that, women's rights don't matter, are not important, but 2/3 do. think it's important. So I think that, we also need to look at the positive side of things,
Mm.
and use that as a starting point as well.
Okay, love it. So let's talk about the kind of the gender and social norms being the root of what so much violence and limitation within women's experiences. And I grew up in a really violent home as well. And I've seen that repeat through my family, to the next generations and stuff. It's huge. How do you see that these norms show up in everyday life today, even in the subtle ways, apart from like big obvious ones where these patterns repeat in
Mhm.
families and it keeps going? What other ways do you see them
Yeah.
show up?
Yeah, and I think I've given a few examples already, but I just think about even my own day. As someone who is someone in her mid 40s that is pretty, independent, have my own home, moved to Mexico, have traveled the world, and don't have anyone to ask for permission technically to do things. Um, just even putting on clothes. So I live in a very tropical environment, and it's quite hot here. So a lot of times you don't want to wear that much, but I still have to think about, what am I going to wear that may or may not invite certain attention that I don't want. We just saw last week the president of Mexico groped on the street, and it's a woman who is, the top level of everything here. And if that can happen to her, what can happen to the rest of us? And from there, it's thinking about, well, I want to go to that special workshop on AI, but it's in this area of town, and that means, can I walk even though it's pretty close? I have to actually take the car, and when I come back, is it going to be too late? So even participating in some activities then becomes questionable. And we know that social networks and that learning and information is a huge resource, right? And so to have to decide whether I'm going to participate in something like that, and that's me. So think about another woman in, let's say, more traditional setting in another part of the world. And then, when I get there, as we talked about the fact that women are interrupted 3 times as much. And in fact, you actually look at data where men are taking up most of the airtime in meetings. So to even fully participate in the meeting, I might have to assert myself even more, speak louder in a certain tone, and then be questioned because I am a woman for doing that. And that's called the tightrope bias, right? So it's too assertive, too abrasive if I'm speaking too much or too loudly. But at the same time, if I don't, that means, I fall into the traditional stereotype of being a woman who maybe can't assert herself enough and not strong enough to lead. So it happens all the time. I was just telling you about the challenges and the problems with the construction in my apartment here, and the water pumps, which I was talking to my neighbor about. And that conversation led to, well, maybe they didn't take you seriously because you're a woman, and they didn't give you the information of how it was, how to adequately do it. So it's boundless, right? And everyday small actions, when we don't even think about it, in fact, that bias is there, and we have to think about how we're being perceived.
Have you found, I'm curious, absolutely. And so how does the average woman, if there's an average woman, tap into the courage from your experience, have you seen women who traditionally maybe wouldn't have tapped into the courage to use their voice? Because I'm all about women using their voices. And I know it takes a huge amount of guts to do that because they can fear being told that they're too loud, too assertive, too aggressive, and get sacked. What have you found because you've been across so many different countries? What are some ways that women access their courage?
I think, for me, that's where data has become so important. And I don't think the answer is going to be the same for everyone.
Mm.
I am someone that is more of the sort of book smart type, or someone that likes my likes to read up and study on things. Some might call it the more intellectual type. And so I use that to really give me the confidence, right, that to back up what I'm saying. And that might not be what others lean into. Each person or each woman might have something different, but I think it's, really reflecting on and that sort of time and experience, because I certainly was not someone, and to this day, I'm seen as a quieter person, right? I don't necessarily have naturally loud voice or speaking up, and I tend to be more introverted, and I think there are perceptions with that as well. And I think that that comes with time and experience, but also just recognizing and being aware of that perception, and that bias towards women also pushes me to want to speak up more, because I know that I have that knowledge, and I need to challenge it.
And you doing so then gives there's that Marianne Williamson poem that she wrote for Mandela. And there's a line in it that I love because it says, when we shine our light, we give other people permission to do the same. So when people like you use your courage and speak up, other women see that or hear of it, and it helps them step up. They think, wow, if she can, I can. Same with me. It's why I'm so driven to be outside my comfort zone and use my voice for the same reason. Someone's got to go first. And I love that you go first. And I love that you've got the data to back up, that gives you the confidence to be able to do that. That's cool. I've never, I'm a data chick, but I'm not a data chick. I'm a data chick, but I like practical application. And I see that's what you're
Mhm.
doing. You're doing a very practical application of great data. What gives you hope that we can change these so deeply seated gender norms? What keeps you going? What gives you hope?
So I think it's really, somewhat of what I alluded to earlier is that I have seen change happen. I've seen it possible. I think when we look at examples in history, for example, foot binding in China was something that was present for 1,000 years, right? A very deeply held tradition that they had to bind women's feet for women's feet to be attractive, and then for them to be married off. But within 20 or 30 years, that practice was dropped with the Right Commitments campaign, amongst the elite, to recognizing that this was harmful, and getting people to agree that they wouldn't marry their sons to a woman that's had her foot bound. So that's one example in history. But we also have more recent examples and examples that I've seen in my work. Violence against women, something that's seen as by some people deeply entrenched, and something that's it's natural. Biological studies have shown that men are more violent, and perhaps this is kind of a natural tendency, when in fact we've seen in settings such as Uganda and South Africa, where rates of violence in some communities are as high as 70% or more in households, within 3 years have been able to reduce levels of violence by 50% through saturating communities with messaging, dialogue, national campaigns, as well as activities with men and women that sort of address things such as improving communication skills, and really trying to get men to understand the positive effects of using their power in a way that's not harmful. And yes, some of that also involves some economic empowerment, but some programs were purely about social norms change. So that does give me hope that it's possible. I worked in Tanzania also for 3 years, living there on an HIV prevention program, working specifically with men, and trying to take it down to the stories now, not just the numbers. But in some of those community education sessions, we saw men say things that we wouldn't expect. That you assume certain settings very traditional, and you're not going to be able to change But they said, yeah, okay, so this is what I learned. I learned that women can initiate sex too. And, and that's what I'm practicing. And, we actually saw change was possible. And then they would say, this is, information that I didn't know how to communicate with my partner about this. And now I want to bring my friends along so that they can learn as well. Um, and I think, taking it to sort of a national level example, I think about Rwanda, which is a country that in 1994 went through horrible genocide, and a million women were raped in that, I think, 1 or 2 month period. And now, I actually visited again in 2023 after, for the first time, I think in about 15 years. It was actually one of the first places that I worked on gender-based violence. And they have over 60% representation in their government. That's women, but not just as figureheads, but actually creating positive change. With that representation, they've actually been able to do analysis. There was a paper put out in 2024 that it's women's representation has led to positive effects in terms of infant mortality in the country and a range of other health benefits. So I think we are seeing now, that change is possible, and that research is getting out there to really make that case, to show the correlations between women's leadership and women's empowerment, but also broader gender equality. Because that's the other thing that they did in Rwanda, not just working at the national level, but strong programs at the community level, again, working with men and women to try to improve relationship dynamics and gender norms.
Nice. Was just thinking, is it the UN or whatever, who defines what violence is from a data perspective? Because
So,
violence is huge. How do they
yeah.
define it?
There, have been there are different studies run by different groups, right? So technically, each study can define violence in the way that they want. But now, after a couple of decades of research, the field of researching violence against women, it's pretty established. Or most robust studies will use the WHO definitions. There is a World Health Organization multi-country study that was, I believe, published it back in 2010. And that was based on a scale that is adapted, which adapted and from a validated scale called the conflict tactic scale. So it's asking about specific acts rather than just a broad term of did you experience violence, but actual acts. And that's then translated and sort of adjusted or adapted to local languages based on context as well.
Okay. Wow, interesting. So if every listener took just one small action this week to challenge gender bias in their world, because I have listeners from all around the world and in so many settings, whether at home or at work or in general conversation, what would be one action that a listener could take to keep forwarding progress on this such important topic?
Well, I think the first
Yeah.
is to check your own bias, right? Because it's easy to say or to look at other people and say you're being discriminatory or sexist. But we also all have bias within us. So this is where I get to plug my Check Your Gender Bias quiz.
Yeah, I love that you've got a quiz people can do. Please tell
Yeah.
us about it.
It's just a simple 20-question quiz that it's pretty quick to go through. It's on Tally online and it's on my website. So I think you are going to
We'll
be
put
giving
the
them
link below. Yeah, wherever you're listening to this, whatever platform, doesn't matter. Have a look in the show notes below, and the direct link to Myra's free quiz is there. Check your biases. Go for it. Tell us more about it.
Yeah, so it takes you through everyday sort of bias, both in your general life as well as in the workplace. And then you'll actually get a score at the end based on your responses. And it's just a starting point, because awareness is really the starting point, right? Just being aware of your biases. And that's something that I hope to then also build out more, to be able to use as part of a broader tool for workplace assessments on how we can promote gender equality in the workplace. So that will be coming. PowerHerData is, as I said, it just started this year and very nascent and still a baby, and hopefully growing it to be able to offer more resources as well. But the other thing is just challenging bias, right? And I don't mean necessarily you're going to go out and start your own social media page or campaign. But when someone says something and kind of just, I do it all the time, actually. I have to check myself. When someone says something that is sexist or rooted in gender bias, I recognize it, because I often think with that, I think with that lens. But a lot of times I'll say, I'm just going to let it go, because, I don't want to get into this big discussion, or I don't want to rock the boat, and I don't want to be confrontational. But I think when we do that, we let it live on. And, I think people easily say, oh, it was just a joke. For example, one of the videos that I posted a couple of weeks ago, which went super viral, was a video of an interviewer asking Javier Bardem, the actor, how does it feel to be the only man that actually enjoys working with his wife? And a lot of people commented, oh, come on, it's just a joke. Why are you saying, calling this out as misogynistic? And I said, well, basically he's saying that all men don't like their wives, their own wives, which, what does that say about them, their views on women? But I think letting things go so easily like that is really where the sexism and misogyny festers and grows.
100% agree. In my younger years, I would feed it. It's such an Aussie thing that, you joke, with the boys, so to speak, and would feed that kind of stuff. And it's like, I don't, as I've gotten older and, become aware, it's wildly, I call on that. I saw a reel go around the other day, a shot of a woman who, and there's a piece in my TED where I talk about how, the word Karen, people have become Karens. And like, I'm so
Mhm.
sorry to the Karens of the world, women who I met in my audience from TED. There were so many women who came up to me and went, my name, I'm Karen. And they've
Mm.
been labeled as Karens because of a woman using her voice in whatever setting and saying, no, not acceptable. And I saw a video where women were calling out a woman and calling her a Karen. I went, what the fuck? Here's women putting down a woman for using her voice. She's allowed to, you mightn't agree with it, but she's still allowed to use a voice. It's like there's so much that's just there. Oh, it's just a joke. And in the
Yeah.
past, in my younger years, totally, I played along with that. And now,
And
no fucking way.
yeah.
It's
And
not
it's
cool.
not just the men. I think that's a great point.
I was shocked that
Quick to
women
sort
did
of
it
call out
that
men.
way.
But
Oh,
yeah.
shocked.
Yeah. It reminds me, if I could just share one more example.
Please do.
I was sitting with some girlfriends, these are my own girlfriends that I love. And one shared that she was going to try to have a baby, a late in life baby, with the help of modern technology. And another who did the same was very happy for her and congratulatory. And the third was very excited because she wanted to do it too. And she turned to me and said, oh, we're going to convince you soon to have a baby. And you're going to, and I just thought, I said nothing, because again, it was one of those moments where, one, I was a little taken aback, but also I
Pick your
didn't,
battles.
yeah, I didn't want to, ruin the nice lunch that we were having. But afterward, I thought it would never be acceptable for me to say, actually, why are you having a baby? Because I just don't think, I have my personal views too. I
And you're
don't think everyone
entitled
should be
to
having
them.
a baby. Yeah.
Uh,
So.
It's huge. So awareness, I agree. Awareness is huge. And so your quiz, I'm going to do it when I get off this call, is because you sent me through the link. I can do it now. I think it's huge to be able to just be aware of our blind spots. We're not even realizing where we're seeing on a day-to-day kind of basis that it is influencing to keep that conversation going where it needs to stop. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's huge. What have I missed saying? What is something that you really want the women of the world to know?
The message that I think is really important to make clear, and that I think gets muddled a lot when we talk about gender equality and empowering women, is that there's only one story, right? And or that means men and women have to be equal in all aspects. And we're not talking about equal form or equal equality in every way. That would be boring, but we're talking about equality of opportunity and choices. And I think that's ultimately, that even that example that I just raised is about the choice that I want to make versus a choice another woman wants to make might be very different, right? So I think feminism often gets a bad rap because people confuse it a lot and think it's just we want women to rule the world and that's it. But what we're actually talking about is just allowing and giving the pathways of choice for women the same way that men have, are able to choose whatever they want to do with their lives. And that's what really trying to advocate for here.
Yeah, rebalancing our humanity. Yeah. If you could go back to your 18-year-old self with the wisdom that you've got today, what would you say to her?
Ooh, I think I would say the same thing, that, just don't let the noise of what you should do and the path you should take limit you. I think I think I've been pretty good at that, but I know that, there was definitely a storyline of what I really believed my life should look like. And I was working towards that for a long time, before I realized, oh, my story doesn't have to be that. You know, I It took me some time to figure out what that story or what that life was that I really wanted. But I think that's because the vision of what my life could or should be was pretty sort of uniform, right? Or it was given that the usual, I don't know if that's
Pathway.
the word, but
Yeah.
the traditional path, of, you're going to find a partner, have children, settle down, have a family, not expect too much, um, not try to, rock the boat too much. Uh, Certainly not start a business, certainly not travel the world as much as I have. And so just be, to just give myself different possibilities and different visions of what I could do with my life is what I'd want to do.
Love it. Love it. How can people best find you, follow you, and tap into what you do? Because I love following what you're up to, and I'm totally going to do the quiz when we get off this call. What's the best ways for people to find you?
Well, definitely on Instagram at PowerHerData. As you said, it's all one word, POWHERDATA. Right now, I am nameless and faceless. Eventually, that's going to start shifting, and I'll start sharing a little bit more. And in my stories, you can get a little bit more of what I'm up to. I am on LinkedIn under my name as well, and we are going to create a LinkedIn page for PowerHerData that will have more of my thoughts and commentary on what's happening in the world through a gender lens.
Cool. And your website is powerherdata.com.
Yes,
POWHERDATA.com.
yes, and
Myra,
it is
yeah, go.
not even fully launched yet. So, I think, thank you again for this platform to allow me to announce it all to the world.
I when I came across your work months and months ago, and it was around the same time that decided to create this podcast, I went, I want to talk to this woman because you deliver really important information with all the data to back it up in a digestible but motivating way. And that's important for me because people, I believe, we need to be able to present information in ways that people can hear it. And there's a lot of information out there that doesn't land and isn't able to be heard. And you are doing a fabulous job at that. So I really encourage everyone to follow Myra. It's yeah, thank you for all you're doing. I know it can be scary putting your ass on the line out there, and I
Mhm.
appreciate you taking a stand. It's important.
Thank you.